It's a day to celebrate in Somaliland, the 29th of September 2005. Somalilanders are heading to the polls to cast their votes to elect a new parliament. These parliamentary elections, the first of their kind in over 30 years and an experiment in democracy on top of an existing and robust clan system. For local councils first in December 2002, for the presidency in April 2003, and now for the House of Representatives. But holding these elections was not an easy undertaking.
The political parties had been given the opportunity to participate in the local elections, then the presidential election. What was missing was their electoral participation in the national legislative body, which didn't fit. It was imperative to hold the parliamentary elections, unless faced with circumstances beyond our control. And if the elections were not held, it would have been a severe blow to Somaliland's democratization process.
Instead, the people of Somaliland once more rose to the occasion to demonstrate their commitment to the democratization process.
It was the public especially who wanted a very good electoral process. That made the whole election very successful.
The process of holding parliamentary elections in Somaliland at the end of September 2005 brought into question the roles of the government, members of parliament, and the political parties. Indeed, the very existence of political parties themselves within a traditionally clan-based society. It considered the role of women and other marginalized people. It tested the very limits of the patience of the key players. And it highlighted the need for compromise and agreement on divisive issues like the distribution of parliamentary seats, representation in disputed areas, and a new code of conduct. There were no magic bullets or easy solutions, but tough decisions to be taken through political negotiation.
We were supposed to be moving to multi-party democracy, but we turned back to clan-based politics.
These elections were the first in more than 30 years. So if we tried to have elections similar to those of the Americans or Europeans in our first election, we were asking for trouble. So we were saying that we should not push too far, but go for a step-by-step improvement. We thank the Academy for hosting these meetings. From the local election to the presidential election, the Academy was the one which was doing the hosting of these discussions in its premises. The code of conduct was the hardest part of this process. Probably it was something others can learn from us. It was the result of constant mediation between the political parties and the government.
The Academy for Peace and Development, together with its partner WSP International, played a key role in keeping the electoral process on track.
The involvement of the Academy in the electoral process began with the local elections. Every Wednesday from February to November in 2002, the Academy held consultative parties. The first point of discussion for them was how to hold free, fair and peaceful elections, and they came up with 12 prerequisites to achieve that. In the parliamentary elections, after the electoral law was passed, and despite the difficulties and problems, the Academy hosted consultative meetings for the political parties every Sunday and Tuesday for 3 months to establish the code of conduct.
This is the story of how the parliamentary elections came about, the major obstacles overcome, and the challenges ahead. The countdown is on and the process is flagging. It's now mid-November 2004. Just 4 months to go to the election. There are no major activities on the ground to move the electoral process forward. In an effort to inject some life into the electoral process, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Caynaba, asks the Academy to find an external expert to help lawmakers draft a new electoral law. Ruben Zamora, a Salvadorian lawyer with extensive experience in transitional democracy in Latin America, arrives in Hargeysa. The Speaker of the House names a special ad hoc committee to work with Mr. Zamora, and they begin drafting the electoral law. The 27th of December 2004, and the draft electoral law is distributed to the lawmakers for review. Debate starts on the floor of the House. The draft bill faces strong opposition from the overwhelming majority of MPs, since they failed to reach a compromise on the seat distribution. January 2005, and the House of Representatives, to the dismay of the public, passes an alternative electoral bill with provisions that now make the March elections impossible. MPs are demanding a reliable national census before the election with the distribution of parliamentary seats based on that census. They are calling for countrywide elections, including in the disputed areas of Seoul and Sanag. And, to reinforce their message, the new law says holding elections without having met these provisions will be regarded as an act of treason. The lawmakers completely misread the public mood. There is widespread denunciation of the controversial bill. To hold the parliamentarians to account, the Academy decides to hold a forum bringing together key government ministers, representatives from the 3 political parties, MPs, women groups, civic organizations, and the public, to discuss the passage of the law, its blistering and confrontational debate. The first face-to-face encounter between the public and the members of the House. Speaker after speaker tell lawmakers that their time is up and that the public will not accept anything less than an election.
Why is this parliamentary election different from the previous elections? And why didn't the lawmakers obstruct the previous ones? I'll tell you. The passing of the electoral law would be tantamount to MPs firing themselves, and no one would be expected to voluntarily sign the end of his own contract.
In their defense, lawmakers argue that the law is the best they could come up with in the absence of a reliable census.
As you all know, for the last 2 years, we lawmakers were unable to resolve the issue of seat allocations. Each MP came under pressure from his clansmen, government officials and elders, and we were unable to reach a solution acceptable to all. Therefore, we felt that no deal on this issue was the only way to save ourselves from the wrath of our respective clansmen.
The government is not spared criticism either, with a significant majority of parliamentarians supporting the ruling UDUB party. Speculation is rife that the lawmakers have been given the green light by the President on the electoral bill. The government's commitment to the electoral process is challenged.
Speaking on behalf of the government, we all know the position of the government on the election. The President told the Parliament that the election would take place on March the 29th. As a government, we are committed to that process. The political fate of the country will not be held captive by 64 MPs. If they fail to act, we will take legal action against them.
Despite mounting public pressure, the Gurti, in their February the 5th vote, seconded the House of Representatives on the new electoral law.
The House of Elders passed the same controversial bill by a two-thirds majority, while the President was away in South Africa. This decision came as a shock and surprise to all the people who wanted the elections and a democracy, and created a state of unease among the public.
With now less than 2 months to the election, the President out of the country, and the public dissatisfied with Parliament's decisions, someone had to step in to provide the leadership necessary to breathe life back into the electoral process.
Rather than panicking, we asked what we could do to move things on the ground. We contacted the Vice President, who called for a consultative meeting. The Vice President said that you, the NEC, and the political parties are the stakeholders. Consult with each other and come up with some solutions. We saw this as a positive development, and so we began.
It is now the second week of February, and the National Electoral Commission has been able to convince the three political parties to sit with them to solve the controversial issue of seat distribution.
The key stakeholders in any election are the contestants that the political parties put forward, with the Commission as a mediator. We felt that the National Electoral Commission was on the right track to ask the political parties to resolve this controversial issue of seat distribution, and for that reason we endorsed the NEC's initiative.
And so the Academy hosts what will become 2 weeks of sometimes heated consultative meetings.
The interests and the positions of the three political parties were different, but at the same time there were also differences within the parties. So sometimes the party itself did not have a common or pre-agreed position, and that made the issue very problematic. The atmosphere of the discussion was very tense. Many people, including party members, followed it closely because of the differences within the party itself, based on regional, district and clan interests. Everyone was trying to promote the interest of his region. Since this issue was the key to the election, we decided not to leave the discussion until we concluded it. So we came up with a distribution table indicating the seats or the share for each region of the 82 national seats. We're not saying this arrangement had no shortcomings, but it was a reasonable solution to bypass this critical juncture. The agreement was declared publicly, and the three political parties and the National Electoral Commission signed it. The mediation role played by the Electoral Commission was a crucial one. NEC was relentlessly reconciling our differences. I can say it was the NEC that made the three political parties settle their differences and reach an agreement.
This joint agreement was a major breakthrough, arguably the turning point in the election process. A question remained, however, as to why the three political parties were willing to resolve such a controversial issue when the Parliament and the government had failed.
The political parties wanted the election more than the parliamentarians. Some MPs in both houses did not want the election as they wanted to stay in their seats. But the political parties also saw that no election meant the end of the political parties.
So, the three political parties have reached an agreement on how to distribute the parliamentary seats. But this will count for nothing unless the President accepts these new arrangements. Under mounting public pressure to reinvigorate the process, the President, on his return from South Africa, starts by referring the controversial electoral bill to the Constitutional Court. On the 26th of February, the Constitutional Court rules in favor of the government, arguing that the articles put in to prevent the election taking place disenfranchised the people of Somaliland. The government, the opposition political parties, and the public at large hailed the decision of the court. After consulting with his cabinets, the Electoral Commission, and other people that included the leadership of the Academy, President Royale decides to send amendments to the electoral law to the House of Representatives. On the issue of seat distribution, the President supports the compromise reached earlier by the three political parties. The March election deadline has now passed. It's April the 2nd. The House of Representatives approves the President's changes. The key legal obstacle to the parliamentary election is removed, and the election is rescheduled for September the 15th. With the legal obstacles out of the way, the pressure is still on to agree a code of conduct for the elections. An established tradition is that before elections, the Academy for Peace and Development host regular afternoon meetings between the three political parties and the National Electoral Commission to discuss the code of conduct and to ease any political tensions that could disrupt the process. Politically, it could not have been more tense.
While we were about to begin the code of conduct discussion, the seizure of Kulmeer's headquarters happened, which heightened the political temperature, making it difficult for the three political parties to have any kind of discussion.
A new radio station critical of the government had started broadcasting on shortwave and on the internet in March. Government forces, under orders from the Ministry of the Interior, raided the main opposition, Kulmeer's, Hargeysa headquarters in early April. They were looking for what the government considered illegal radio broadcasting equipment. In response, Kulmeer suspended all channels of communication with the government and the National Electoral Commission. Members of Parliament loyal to Kulmeer attempted to introduce impeachment proceedings against the President. Kulmeer has to be brought back on board for the Code of Conduct meetings.
We joined the discussion, though we suspended all our working relationships with the Commission, the government and the ruling party, UDUB, as a result of the illegal raid on our office. The Commission was saying that Kulmeer would only deal with the Commission and would not have any direct discussion and working relationship with UDUB and the government.
In reality, as soon as the talks began, Kulmeer was back in the fray. Discussions on the Code of Conduct were very tough and tense at times, but they were carried out in good faith, and the opposition took an active role.
The issues we wanted the Code of Conduct to address, and which took most of our time and attention, were to do with regulating the use of public resources during the elections, such as government vehicles, public funds, and the public media. What we were talking about the most was the radio and the national television, which were being used 24 hours a day to attack and consistently condemn us, something everyone's aware of. The opposition was always complaining about a lack of equal access to public funds, public radio and television. Such accusations against the ruling party are common in Somaliland and across Africa. However, we felt addressing this important issue was imperative for the fairness of the election, and we were willing to have regulations that not only apply to today's election, but to all future elections. After all, at the next election, we know we could become the opposition. When the opposition political parties were being unreasonable, however, we had to stop them going too far.
To win the confidence of the opposition, the National Electoral Commission had to provide some assurances that the agreements would be more than just ink on paper.
I had to tell the opposition that this would be a binding agreement signed by either the Vice President or the President, and as such they would be compelled to adhere to and respect it. If they breached it, the least we would do is tell the public and the world that the government had breached an agreement signed with the opposition. Another confidence-building measure was the formation of an independent monitoring board committee to monitor compliance with the Code of Conduct.
Despite these reassurances from the National Electoral Commission, the opposition remained very skeptical about government compliance with the Code of Conduct.
The Code of Conduct was a very good document, but the reality was that no body or law could prevent the government from using public resources, since it had the resources in its hands. Though we were aware of that, we continued to participate in the discussions for the sake of coming up with something. I knew that some of the issues would be hard to regulate, but despite that, we preferred to let the process go on.
The Code of Conduct is eventually agreed, a signal that the three political parties are committed to free, fair, and peaceful elections. Media guidelines for the election period, developed with the help of the Academy and the BBC World Service Trust, and sanctioned by the Commission, are also agreed by Somaliland's two media associations at the same ceremony. The parliamentary elections were the most significant test yet of the strength of the political parties. Just how rooted are they in the Somaliland body politic?
It was the role of the political parties to select their respective candidates to prove that they were relevant as a party. That did not happen because not one party selected its own candidate. The clan held behind-the-scenes meetings to select their candidate or candidates. Then the clans were forwarding their respective candidates to the political parties, and the parties were accepting them without objection.
Some even accused the political parties of actively taking the country back to clan politics rather than forward to multi-party democracy.
The person was not being selected on the basis of his or her program or accomplishments, but rather on the basis of his or her clan. Therefore, the political parties failed to play their democratic role and took the country back to clan politics, which we were supposed to be moving away from.
The reality is that the political parties were attempting to assert their relevance as a political body quite separate from the clan, but the clan was simply too strong.
During the nomination process, our party established a committee responsible for selecting the party candidates, and I was a member of that committee. We devised a criteria for selecting the party's candidates. In one incident, the elders in one of the clans in Somaliland brought us a candidate of their choice to replace the party candidate we had selected from their clan. We refused to accept the candidate. They insisted, saying that unless we nominated their choice, the clan would not vote for the party. We stuck with our party candidate, but the clan was right. The party's candidate did not get the vote of his clan. He lost the election. The electorates in Somaliland are not mature enough for multi-party democracy. I believe the political parties had a good start. Our experience in party politics is limited. So far, there are very few people involved in the activities of the three political parties in relation to the population of the country. So, given the time constraints, basing their nomination process on clan lines was the best option for them under the current circumstances.
The strength of the clan system denied nomination opportunities to two disenfranchised and marginalized groups in Somaliland society. Women, despite being the majority of the voting population, were not considered for nomination by the parties.
Women belong to different clans like everybody else. But the problem is not that women's loyalty is often questioned. They often say to us, which clan will you represent? The one you're married to or your clan family?
Neither were the members of the Gaboye kinship. Historically, the members of the Golaha Gaboye have formed an endogamous community whose members perform tasks considered menial by others, noble or Aji Somalis, leatherworking, metalworking, hairdressing, shoemaking, and pottery. Unlike other Somalis, who are typically associated with one or more well-defined localities, the Golaha Gaboye are found throughout the Somali territories, living as clients of the dominant noble groups. They may not intermarry with other Somalis, and conventional paths to social mobility are not open to them.
The political parties were choosing candidates on three grounds: the size of his clan in a given area, as every clan is dominant in one area, the wealth or influence of his clan, and being part of the party clique. So our disadvantaged groups were disqualified on these grounds. We are the poorest of the poor, and though we live everywhere, we're not concentrated in any one area where the political parties could see we might come first or second in the elections.
The Gaboye also felt the way the political parties selected their two candidates.
The way the political parties selected our two candidates was not like the way other clans selected theirs. The political parties allowed the other major clans to nominate their candidate of choice, but for us, the political parties imposed their choice of our candidate on us.
It's now August the 14th, one day before the start of the election campaign. But there's another delay. It's now August the 14th, one day before the start of the election campaign. But there's another delay. Election materials and equipment are not yet ready. So the elections are postponed for another 14 days. September the 29th is the new date set. Campaigning now gets underway on August the 26th. The campaign is hotly contested but festive. The events draw large crowds. It is a time for everybody to prove they can galvanize their support. But instead of issues, there are only slogans. No debate, just entertainment.
The public rallies were not organized properly. The public were not brought together to hear enthusiastic or inspiring speeches with substance. They were only praising their parties or candidates. Secondly, they did not campaign on issues and policies. The country has so many problems with water shortages, land disputes, environmental problems, the livestock ban. I did not hear one party clearly articulate its policy or program on these pressing issues.
Every election campaign has its complaints, disputes, and allegations, and this campaign is no different. But in this election, the opposition parties had one main concern.
What is required and should be part of our democratic culture is how we are going to separate the ruling party and the government during the elections. What are the rights and obligations of these two entities during elections? What differentiates between the candidates of the ruling party and government ministers or officials?
Dawn, and election day is finally here. The National Electoral Commission has been praying for a dry, sunny day, and their prayers have been answered. More than 600,000 Somalilanders turn out to vote for a new House of Representatives.
We feel very cheerful today. We are very pleased with the orderly way our people are casting their votes and with the prevailing peace in our country. We are delighted with the achievement of our people.
There are problems. In the absence of voter registration, some try to vote twice. There are underage voters, and the strict ban on vehicle movement is occasionally broken. However, when the polls close throughout the country, there is a collective sigh of relief that the day has gone peacefully. Domestic and international observers alike vouch for the free, fair, and transparent nature of Somaliland's parliamentary elections. The results are delayed. Staff at polling stations have been up all night counting. There are difficulties in tallying votes in some polling stations, which leads to contested results. Recounts are done. Eventually, on October the 15th, the National Electoral Commission releases the complete preliminary results and sends them to the Constitutional Court for ratification. The three political parties and their respective candidates accept the results. The final result gave the ruling UDUB 33 seats, with Kulmiye 28 seats and UID 21. The opposition control 49 seats. With clan-based power sharing, each of Somaliland's clans were represented in the previous parliament regardless of the size of the clan, which is by definition an inclusive, consensus-based system. There are no losers. With the adoption of a one-person, one-vote system, however, the clan composition of the new parliament changed dramatically, and there were losers.
In this election, it seems that the major clans gained more seats and were the winners, while the representation of the smaller clans has fallen. For the Hati people of Sul and Sanag, representation in parliament has fallen, and that is troubling. They were divided on the elections. Some wanted to participate, while others refused.
To analysts, the loss of seats by the Harti and Isa clans will increase their sense of marginalization within Somaliland, which could further alienate them from the country. Other losers in the election were women and the Gaboye. Women candidates won only 2 seats, one in a straight vote count, and the other from one of the reserve seats.
Women in Somaliland only support each other in times of need. Usually they will come to you saying, Mrs. So-and-so is in need, let's help her. But 90% or more do not believe a woman can represent her interests in parliament and in other decision-making bodies. When women realize that a woman can be her representative in parliament, the prospect of women being elected will be further improved.
Until the clan system changes in their favor, women's groups want structural changes to improve their election chances. Analysts, the loss of seats by the Harti and Isa clans will increase their sense of marginalization within Somaliland, which could further alienate them from the country. Other losers in the election were women and the Gaboye. Women candidates won only 2 seats, one in a straight vote count, and the other from one of the reserve seats.
Women in Somaliland only support each other in times of need. Usually they will come to you saying, Mrs. So-and-so is in need, let's help her. But 90% or more do not believe a woman can represent her interests in parliament and in other decision-making bodies. When women realize that a woman can be her representative in parliament, the prospect of women being elected will be further improved.
Until the clan system changes in their favor, women's groups want structural changes to improve their election chances.
The influence of clan will continue for the foreseeable future. It is strongly rooted within our society. Therefore, until that influence is weakened, women should have explicit quotas to ensure the representation in parliament.
Similarly, the Gaboye had enough numbers in Hargeysa to pick up at least 1 or 2 seats, but their candidates failed miserably. A lack of economic resources was among the contributing factors in their downfall.
Our people are not politically conscious. They don't understand the value of political representation as a way to help their candidates. We failed to contribute our votes to our candidates, and that includes me. I'm not leaving myself out.
Unlike the women, these marginalized groups are still divided over the idea of a quota system.
I don't support a quota system for us. I see it as degrading and a kind of segregation. I personally hate anything that is seen to be only for Gaboye, even if it is done in good faith. So I prefer to compete, even if it takes us 100 years to achieve some representation.
Others disagree.
Absolutely. I'm for some kind of quota until our people become more politically conscious. It would be good to have specific quotas for women and us.
Somaliland overcame a critical period in its history by successfully holding these elections. But this is just the beginning, not the end. Somaliland is now entering a new post-election period, and there is a crucial need to institutionalize this process. There's a need for a census, voter registration, periodical elections following the Constitution, capacity building for the National Electoral Commission, reviewing the Constitution and the electoral laws. For the foreseeable future, there will be cohabitation between clans and political parties. The crucial challenge is how quickly the move from the clan system to constitutional democracy takes place, and how that transition is handled.